Yeah, gentlemen, good morning. So, when I was Minister of National Security, I encountered that situation, and I did the research. And Trinidad and Tobago, I think, out of 200 countries in the world, we are the only country in the world where every single form of camouflage is illegal. Now, there are several countries that have camouflage illegal in the resemblance of the defense force, and primarily those are Caribbean countries: Jamaica, Guyana, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Barbados. So there was a law that was made in the equivalent of the Defense Act in the Caribbean, different Caribbean countries, that they do not want people to have the same type of camouflage in the resemblance of the defense force. So you could see some justification for that. When I was minister and I started walking into PRC, and I started seeing a pink camouflage toy, a lady with a yellow camouflage cap, that is illegal. So, to gentlemen and on goodly senator, you will know laws are not made just to inconvenience people. Laws are made deliberately to form some degree of order, some degree of law to ensure that people can be safer. If a child has a pink camouflage toy, how could that be an issue that is going to affect security, affect you? If a lady has a yellow camouflage cap, it is the dumbest law ever. And no one ever tried to amend it. When I was Minister of National Security, I drafted the note to have it removed because Customs piggybacked on the Defense Act, Chapter 1401, that stated that no one is allowed to have camouflage in the resemblance of the defense force. And the reason for that is that someone may get the uniform of the defense force, put it on, and then try to imitate a defense force personnel and to assist in committing crime, similar to you're not supposed to wear similar uniform to the police service. So that you could understand to some degree. In most countries,
pom shorts threaten national security. How are pom shorts and camouflages threaten national security? Explain it to me. Is this track police? Is this track defense force personnel so they can't do their job?
Well, well, maybe, but besides that, and that is the point. So there are two laws. There's the Defense Act 1401 that says you cannot wear camouflage in the resemblance of the defense force to imitate a defense force officer. So that is different. Where you have the exact jacket, you have the pants, and you're trying to imitate a soldier. That is different to what Customs did. Customs then there was a copy of that act that said that any type of camouflage, and I said we are the only country in the world that has such a dumb law. I sent it to Minister Dillon, I sent it to the then Attorney General of the PNM. It was all ignored because all it takes is just to repeal that aspect. So even if we still want to have a debate about the defense force, because you can know you go to North America, all over the world, you can wear a camouflage jacket. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't see destabilizing them countries.
Pardon?
I don't see destabilizing them countries. I have on a camouflage exercise shorts right now. Like I'm breaking down if I was in public with that. They go rash me.
No,
take it off. Take it off. Take it off.
But as I said, let us take one at a time. There are two laws. At least there could be a debate about persons having the full camouflage uniform of the defense force and you try to imitate. But a child with a pink camouflage toy, how could that? So when we walk into the PRC airport and we see this poster by Customs, I mean, you must be a head of Customs. You must be a Minister of National Security to realize it is a dumb law. It serves no purpose. It does nothing to affect national security. That law should be removed. I drafted it. Minister Dillon took it and threw it in the trash because anything that's done by previous governments, you have to ignore. It is a dumb law and it should be removed. What is just as important, gentlemen, is that most people in the other 200 countries in the world will not think that if I have a green camouflage, a yellow camouflage wallet, you're going to confiscate it when I get to the airport. And that caused a lot of problems for customs officers. It caused a lot of embarrassment for the tourists and for our country because no foreigner abroad could think that a country is so backward that if you have a fluorescent pink camouflage vest, it is going to be seen as a threat to the state.
Why
you have no arguments from me. I think it's ridiculous and it should be removed.
There's absolutely nothing that can make it be perceived that if it is you repeal this law, it is going to affect national security. Nothing. The full camouflage and the resemblance of the defense law. So as I said, the Defense Act has a law, but then Customs has another. They piggyback from that law and they misinterpreted the wording. So whereas the Defense Act 1401 says camouflage in the resemblance of the defense force, which is what you will see here, the back here, that green, that is the defense force camouflage. You know, if it's somebody wears that full and they're walking somewhere, you can very well believe that this person is a member of the defense force, and you may give him that leeway. It may cause him to get into some way that he shouldn't be. So you could, it's give and take on that. Let's not go there. Let's go to the point of the custody.
Makes sense.
And
Gary,
yeah,
without giving out anything that may compromise national security, because I know you're always very careful about that. We want to talk a bit about several issues this morning. The issue of CCTV cameras. You were commissioner for 3 years, so you would have had information and access to CCTV camera footage in the execution of your duties and gathering data to solve crimes in the country as head of the police service. And we had information from a question posed by MP for Barataria Salma Saddam Hussein recently to the Minister of National Security, which indicated that of the 1,700 or so CCTV cameras, about 700 or 800 were inactive. What was your perspective on that while you were commissioner? Is it that they would have done an audit before, because you were commissioner from the end of the first term of the PNM in this incarnation, and Dr. Rowley, right?
correct.
Was there an audit done of the number of active CCTV cameras with a view to either maintaining or replacing the ones that became obsolete and unfixable? What is the approach on that? Because that confuses me, that something as useful as having an active CCTV camera network to aid law enforcement in gathering data to solve crime and criminals is a point of contention in this country.
Yeah, I have to admit, the government, they were dealing with it. There was that concern. I think what caused the problem is that they decided to do a new tender process, and the new tender process, this company came out of the woodwork, Johnson or whatever it is, and they all of a sudden they got the full tender to.
What does that mean, come out of the woodwork?
Well, I mean, because they were looking at the name of the company. I'm not here to criticize anyone or to question the whole tender process was done, but all of a sudden this company just came out and they became the new providers for it. So because of that, there's a lot that had to change. And so whereas they had the initial company that would have provided 1,700, you'd have thought that all it will take is for them now, because there's a maintenance project, there's a degree of making sure that those persons will be responsible to repair and to maintain the cameras. That was not done. There was a whole new tender that was done. Then after, there was some leak that came out in the Ministry of National Security where the tender and the cost was revealed prior to, so they had to start over again. So there were a number of different factors that caused this to be delayed constantly, to the point where they finally decided that a new company will come and take over. And by that new company taking over, it caused the project to be delayed even further to get those 700 odd cameras repaired. Having said that, it still didn't matter. The 50% odd that were operational, why were they not being used after I left? The fact is that the Commission of Inquiry into the Attempted Coup in 1990 stated that the country needed a national operations center.
We're giving a lot of information. So although there was a change in whatever procurement decision made to the provider to change to Johnson, because that company's name came up recently, the ones that were left operational were not used? Is that what you're saying? And if so, why not? So there was 700 still operational, and they were not used. Why is that?
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm coming to. So I just wanted to start it from the Commission of Inquiry recommended the National Operations Center because one hand they knew what the other was doing. There was no real-time video footage. The country wasn't seeing anything. And it's similar to what happened after 9/11, where NYPD will piggyback and take cameras from even the private sector and have it all in one police plaza. So when I went to NYPD, I saw what happened as the Minister of National Security. Then we formed the National Operations Center at Knowsley, and it was set with representatives from the police, the army, the Coast Guard, the customs, the immigration, everybody working together, having representatives, and we're monitoring what is going on. That's after I left. For some strange, Minister Dillon decided to send that under the SSA, which was as dumb as you could get, because that is an operational system to ensure you're watching what is happening in the country in real time. When I became commissioner, I then went there to Knowsley, got a feed of all those cameras to form the operational command center and the commissioner's command center in the police admin building. That is when we had the 150 men coming down into Port of Spain to destroy Port of Spain. We used that to save Port of Spain from being destroyed because they were coming here to destroy Port of Spain that day. And that now would allow us to be monitoring everything. Those 700 cameras were good enough at the time. That is why people will see every time there's a traffic congestion, we could immediately send a police officer out. If there's a 999 call, we can look and see the situation and know exactly what are the police vehicles in closest proximity. That is no longer there. And because of that, so there's no operational unit that is monitoring all the cameras to ensure you can have an immediate response. The cameras are only there after the fact. But the value of those cameras, it provides real-time video footage. The real-time video footage could only be of value if you have officers on the ground monitoring the cameras. So if at any time, it's not to say that you're staring at 700 cameras, but as soon as there's a 999 call, there's a traffic congestion, there's an accident, you immediately get the feed of that camera, you see what is happening, and then you contact the emergency response unit teams, the fire services, or whoever to respond to that situation. That is no longer there.
You're saying that is not happening at present?
Yeah, well, you can see, when last have you ever seen a police officer in a traffic congestion? When last have you seen police patrols anywhere? It is shut down.
No, I'm speaking about the monitoring of the cameras. You're saying that is not happening anywhere?
No, it's not. What is happening, there's no link to the monitoring to the operation on the ground. So it means that if you're monitoring, you must have an immediate link to units to be on the ground. So it's similar to like one police plaza. You see something from a 999 call, you can immediately now look at the vehicles in closest proximity because you have GPS on the vehicles monitoring their area of responsibility to say that they stay in the location. All that has been removed. So when we had
Gary, hold up. Because we have heard from other commissioners since you that these things are in fact being monitored, and even through the Ministry of Works and Transport, because there's a link because of the traffic issues and so on, that they also have a monitoring area. You're saying that is not happening?
No, it is there, but it is not. There's no link between that and operations on the ground. The value of the live cameras is to make sure that immediately you can have an immediate response, and that's where the criminals have realized now. I could go to Residence nightclub, shoot someone in the head, and the commissioner's residence that is next door, the St. James station is 100 meters away. The police will turn up 45 minutes later. I could go in Belmont and kill 4 people. There's not going to be a response. What we had in the police admin building and the operation command center at Nosley, we had about 20 odd persons, civilians and police officers monitoring. So if at any time there's a 999 call, we link all of the cameras. We can see when the vehicle is escaping. We can now look at the camera to see where they're heading, and then look at the vehicles in closest proximity through the GPS. We could now tell vehicle number 35 from Diego Martin, vehicle number 23 from Port of Spain, you need to go to the corner of so-and-so, you'll intercept vehicle so-and-so. That's how we were able to, a few moments later, it wasn't by VAPs, it was based on a scientific approach by using the 700 cameras from an operation command center, getting live information fed to the units on the ground.
But I can't even begin to imagine, based on what we've been going through in this country, every day, that is not happening.
Wendell, it's just, I'm sorry to say, but it's just natural political pettiness.
But that's not even politics. We don't know who committing the crime. We don't know who the victims of crime. We don't know that is the opposition being harmed, if you know what I mean. So we don't really care. We can't know that. You just depressed me there, yes?
No, gentlemen, but the thing is, it can change. I mean, I'm not here to play the political game and blame the PNM. I mean, I would have seen similar situations may have taken place when the PNM left office. It has been a bad precedent by administrations that when you change, shut down, dismantle, remove. And it is sad. And it happened with me as a minister when I had the Rapid Response Unit, the National Operations Center, the National Security Special Operation Group, the National Training Academy. Eddie Dillon shut down everything. And then when I became commissioner and I formed the Emergency Response Patrol, SORT, the social media response team, the police app, the online reporting, the app reporting, the real-time video, the body cameras, the dashboard cameras, all of that was shut down as well.
What would drive the incidents that we saw?
Let me finish this point, Paul. If truth be told, you were also part of a government that came in 2010 that shut down everything that the previous government had.
No, I was a national security advisor at the time. When I became minister, I piggybacked on a lot I saw that the PNM did. So whereas the PNM, they were looking at the OPVs, I got the diamond vessels at 1.2 billion less. when the PNM had the SORT, S-A-U-T-T, when I became commissioner, I cheated and I called it S-O-R-T. So when the PNM had the helicopters, I was getting drones. It's not helicopters, the blimp. So I saw the value of certain things that would have been done by the PNM. I'm not here to play politics. I looked at the bad and the ugly, and I was able to implement those things. That is what politicians should do.
Okay.
What would, when you see the two particular incidents in the between Sunday and Monday, that in one instance a car pulls up in Belmont and just shoots 4 men, and then police find in Arima/Blanchisseuse a car with 3 bodies of men executed. What does that tell you is happening?
What is happening is that the criminals have become brazen. They've now understood that the product of opportunity is there. There's no deterrent. There's no high visibility by the law enforcement officials. There's no rapid response. And so what they're doing now is that they're making most of the product of opportunity. But my point being is that it can turn around. We did so much research when we formed that Emergency Response Patrol, ERP. We have 9 divisions in the police service. We put 10 vehicles in each division. So, for example, Diego Martin, imagine 3 vehicles patrolling 24/7 in Caranage, Petite Valley, Diego Martin, and 1 in Cocorite. If at any time there was a 999 call, you will get a response in less than 3 minutes. And that was factual. We made sure that the 999 system didn't have persons being put on hold for 45 minutes. We made sure the person will answer immediately. We had the online and app reporting so persons can do and give us information, so that what we were doing is something known as predictive policing. We saved about 40 odd lives, especially because of the Special Operation Response Team by predictive policing, Paul, doing just what you spoke about. We will get information from citizens that these guys have now put weapons in a vehicle and they're heading to a location, and we will stop the murders from taking place. So the 342 murders in my last year, which was the lowest number of murders in 17 years, wasn't by accident. It was by predictive policing.
So given your experience, what do you think drove those 2 incidents? What is that? Just retaliation and gang warfare? What drove those 2 incidents?
Well, it will be retaliation, but my point being is that if it is that proper deterrents are there, the criminal elements will not be so brazen to feel that they can just be shooting people in cold blood in the middle of broad daylight. And that is the point. They now believe that they can do it. When you go to a residence nightclub and shoot someone and just walk away, because you know that the police will turn up in 30, 40 minutes, and it's no fault of the police. The police can only operate as good as the technology that is given to them and the leadership that is provided for them. And if it is that you take away the National Operations Center, the Operational Command Center, the GPS tracking on the police vehicles, the 999 system being in 12 persons are supposed to be there 24 hours a day, there are no 1 and 2. Because I told Stuart Young to hand it over to the police, we'll man it fully. They kept it in the Ministry of National Security, which is why when people call 999, sometimes you're back on hold for 45 minutes. All of these things now is just cause the criminals to realize the product of opportunity is there. I could kill in cold blood. I could walk away without even running. Home invasions had stopped. There was no such thing as home invasions. You jump over the wall, then you'll hear a few moments later. It's because as soon as someone made that 999 call, you press that SOS on your phone. Immediately, we will look at the vehicles in closest proximity using the GPS tracking, and we'll close in on you. Kidnappings ended because it's the only time we were able to stop kidnappings using technology. The kidnappers couldn't understand how we were kicking down doors, intercepting vehicles with the victims in the trunk or in the back or in the house, because we were able to use the technology provided. All that is required is for the Prime Minister to swallow his pride, have a discussion with me. I will show him what is required, what can be done. And I'm not saying that everything will be back to how it was 2 years ago, but it will drastically peg back the criminals. The criminals have realized that every single thing that was there 2 years ago that put fear in them is no longer there.
You know what I wanted to ask? When we talk about those situations, like what took place in Belmont, etc., I know you're talking about the integration of the command centers, how it's connected to cars on the ground and the response time. Is it that we don't really need air support anymore? Or is air support something that we should consider in some form or fashion? Because we always talk about it here and saying, if we had air support, because you have to use the roads. As Wendell said this morning, if you're exiting out of Belmont, there are only certain ways to exit out of Belmont in terms of following a vehicle. And if you have air support, you can make that easier. Is it that control center and the 700 cams and the interconnection was enough?
No, definitely. No, you hit the nail on the head there, Richard. Again, I did a lot of research in different countries, and again, looking at what the Patrick Madigan administration had with the Goodyear blimp. Welcome to the 21st century, Wendell. What you need was drones, and the drones will turn night into day. It can lock onto a vehicle. So when we speak about trying to secure our borders, for example, the drones that I was getting was able to go like 3,000 meters above sea level, lock onto any vessel that is entering our waters, lock onto it, be able to pick up a vehicle that will now meet the vessel, pick up the license plate, lock onto that vehicle and see exactly where that vehicle will go. That is how you secure your country. That's how you secure your borders. And similar, Richard, the same drones what I was getting was to be used not just to monitor like a hot pursuit or whatever, but simple things as traffic congestions. Traffic congestions, if you recall, it's not accidental. Like 2 years ago, you were hardly seeing traffic. Every time there was traffic, we had a police officer on site. The drones now will be able to fly over, pinpoint what is the problem, and then get fire services.
If the police, under everybody watching, including yours, don't want to wear a body cam, you really think they're going out there with a machine to hold up, to send up a drone to monitor anything?
No, that's the point. What happened? The drone now would have been part of the operational command center. So not. And let me tell you something. Those police officers in the operational command center, they were second to none. They were able to monitor. There was no traffic, even for Carnival around the Savannah, because we had the police officers there. Their moral was high. They were motivated, and they were ready to use the drones the same way as the National Operations Center. So
but they weren't ever ready to use body cams.
Yes, they were, because what I did is I signed a standard operational procedure. If at any time you leave your vehicle, the body cameras must be turned on. So if you want a 2-hour patrol, a foot patrol through St. James, and you remember the days when you used to have police officers patrolling, foot patrol, all that stopped since I left as well. So when they're patrolling St. James and we know they're on patrol for 2 hours, when you come back, if you realize the camera was not on, disciplinary action will be taken on you. And that is how we were able to measure their performance, by knowing if you're on a foot patrol, you've got to turn it on. If you have to go in a roadblock, if you have to go on a raid, if you have a warrant, you turn it on. It's a similar situation, gentlemen, as if you don't put systems to measure performance and make people accountable, they will do what they want. One of the biggest issues I had was police officers not attending court. The Police Service Commission, they were furious. They said, sort it out. And the reason being is that police officers will not attend court, nothing will be done. I was able to reduce the police absenteeism by 87 to 93% in every division. And by doing that, is you don't attend court, I bust your truth. Or we had another police officer as a backup in case that police officer is absent or sick or died or retired. And that allowed criminals to realize, because a lot of them were committing crime knowing that the police officer would not even come to court. So unless you put systems to measure their performance and make them accountable, similar to the body cameras, they just wouldn't use it. You've got to put disciplinary measures and stick to it and put those standard operational procedures. And failure for you to adhere to it, well, then you will pay the price.
Do you think the 100 volunteer TTDF officers as assigned into action by the president will make a difference?
Well, just to clarify that, the 100 volunteers, this has been going on for years after years after years. It's, hearing people saying that the sector say they welcome it. This has been done for the last decade plus. It's a template that you just change the year and you bring out the 100 volunteers. These 100 volunteers, and just to clarify, they are members of the reserves. It's now known as the Defense Force Reserves, not the Volunteer Defense Force. So these reserves, the plan is always bring them out, pay them full salary for 3 months, and they will now guard the camps so that the regular soldiers can now come and complement the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. That has been the norm. So all this nonsense we are hearing from persons, criminologists and business sectors saying, oh, we welcome this move. This is a normal SOP that is done every single year. So this is not a panic button pressed by the commander-in-chief. This is not something, and the commissioner of police saying this is welcome news. She doesn't even know this has been done every single year. But the problem exists that we have 5,000 members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. Bringing an extra 100 is not going to solve the problem, because the Chief of Defense Staff, if you recall, gentlemen, in March this year, he said the Defense Force is not trained to support the police. He's my batch. I couldn't believe that he does not know the role and function of the Defense Force. It is to support the police and aid to civil power. And they are trained to do this. I was there in Haiti in the United Nations. The police have been getting the support of the Defense Force through IATF and SAUT and so forth for decades. So for our Chief of Defense Staff to say that they are not trained to do this it means that he's not going to send them out, which is why when I spoke about the 150 men coming down into Frederick Street during the COVID period with Molotov cocktails and bottles and pipe to destroy Port of Spain, and I asked the Defense Force for support, I was told that they will be on standby in Camp Ogden. If that was not time to get support of the Defense Force, thankfully, because we had the Operation Center, we did a strategic plan, we barricaded them, we used tear gas, we didn't fire a shot, and we diverted them back down into Duke Street to prevent Port of Spain from being destroyed. Did the police service get a thanks for it? Nothing. Not even not a word.
You're saying that the Defense Force told you as Commissioner of Police that we'll be on standby in Camp Ogden with a impending raid.
And Minister Stewart and I had a war in it because I realized he as the minister was weak. He didn't understand the role and function of the Defense Force. And that's why the Defense Force, they don't come out. So you have 5,000 members of the Defense Force. You get about 100 of the 5,000 that support the IATF. That is not good enough. And this is not the fault of the soldiers and sailors and airmen. They want to work. They want to come out and perform. That's why they swore an oath. But because the Chief of Defense Staff is not aware of the role and function of the Defense Force, he's not aware of the training of the Defense Force personnel. And now what happens in the few patrols that you bring with them, the poor police officers now have to take their vehicles, go to Tetron, go to Camp Ogden, pick them up like if it's an Uber, transport them, do the patrols, drop them back to... It's a very untidy situation. In fact, the police prefer not to have them because it puts great inconvenience on the police. The Defense Force is a powerful institution. They should not be seen as only an institution that is there to help us after a coup every 30 years. There's a lot that they can do. They have to complement the police. They do not have powers of arrest, but they are trained to be part of roadblocks, cordon and search, being in patrols, being in operations with the police being at the forefront. That is all it takes. It has been done for decades from General Ralph Brown, Brigadier Theodore, Brigadier Alfonso, John Sandy, Franklin. It has always been done. It's the first Chief of Defense Staff that does not know the role and function of the Defense Force, and the first Chief of Defense Staff that says, I don't think they are trained to do so. So bringing this extra 100, why you're bringing in an extra 100 when you as the Chief of Defense Staff, you're still going to be reluctant to bring out the officers to support the police.
So what you just explained to us, Gary, is that the calling out of these 100 reserves, voluntary Defense Force officers, is merely to man the camps so that the actual soldiers can go out with the police? Is that what I
Yes, because remember, when you have Camp Ogden, Tetron Barracks, it takes a lot of soldiers to be able to man the camp on a regular basis. So it's not that these reserve personnel are going to go out on the patrols with the police. The regular soldiers who have a lot more training would be the ones that will go out. So the perception of hearing people, you could put volunteers to go out and patrol, that is not the case. So the Defense Force, they understand how this works. You bring in the reserves to guard the camps, to guard the guard boots and so forth, and to do the patrols around the camps, so that the regular soldiers who were previously doing that is required can now be free up to be able to go and support and complement the police service in patrols outside.
So these reserves are largely retired people or people who exercise other function and just and are there in support of the Defense Force. Is that the understanding of these reserves?
Generally, yes. So they were previously known as the Volunteer Defense Force, is now the Defense Force Reserves. It will comprise mostly persons who would have retired from the Defense Force, but also persons who will be under the age of retirement age, but they signed up in the Defense Force to be a reserve rather than to be a regular soldier or sailor. And so if there's a time such as a state of emergency, an attempted coup, martial law, they'll then come and become full-fledged soldiers or sailors and work full-time. So what is done to ensure that they can work full-time, the Commander-in-Chief signs this template every year, take 100 of them so that they will get 3 months full salary. The employers of these persons are mandated to clear them, to give them the time off without any retaliation. And with that now, these reserves who have some basic degree of training, not the type of regular training that the regulars will have, so that they will stay in the camp, do the guard, and the regular soldiers will come out now to patrol with the police. But my point being, you have an air guard, for example, about 700 people in the air guard. There's no aircraft, there's no helicopter, there's not even a slingshot, there's not even a kite. They are all in PRCO. You're talking about 500 odd that apart from those who have to guard the camp in PRCO, that can come out and complement the police service. We need numerical superiority to peg back the criminals. It is a war out there. You can't have 5,000 persons staying in camp, being on standby. And goes back to my point, gentlemen, when we had 150 men coming down into Frederick Street to destroy Port Spain, not one member of the defense force, thanks to Stuart Young, came out to support the police. The police had to do it on their own, thanks to the special operation response team.
We can't blame the minister. We don't have the facts to be able to say.
No, Wendell, I can tell you, Wendell, the minister is the one who will give approval for the defense force to come out. It's not the defense force makes the call. The minister has to make that call.
But you just said the current chief of defense staff don't have a clue what about the
but listen, that is the point. If the chief of defense staff will tell the minister we're not trained, the minister will buy it. This wasn't a GSC meeting, this was quoted. The chief of defense staff said we are not trained to do so, which means he doesn't know the training of these soldiers.
There's a lot of conversation about these proposed crime talks between the government and the opposition. Your name has been drawn in, as it is wont to be in many circumstances. And there's a lot of conversation about whether the Prime Minister has named his team as being chaired by the Attorney General, a more senior counsel, and comprising the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy, Minister of Public Utilities, and somebody else. And so it seems the Prime Minister will not be chairing that meeting or in attendance. Do you think the talks will or can be of value even without the Prime Minister?
It can. I'm not saying that it'll destroy the whole talks by him not being there. I don't want to be so biased. But again, something of this magnitude, the biggest concern the country has right now is whether people are going to be alive in the following day. So this is where leadership by example comes in. I would think that he will want to be there. But if it is that you have an ego and you feel that you so despise the opposition, you don't want to be there, what else could there be more important than you not being there? You are the chair of the National Security Council. So, but having said that, it doesn't mean that the talks cannot be fruitful. It does not start off on the right foot when you start immediately to say, well, I'm not being there. 1, 2, we will have 5 people, you will have 4. 3, you shift the goalposts and you move it from government and opposition to automatically insert the word parliamentarians in a convenient way to ensure that I will not be there. Stop having such a bank over Gary Griffith. Let's just get the job done. Let's just work together. And the country is seeing it. Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles could see that he's intimidated by me. He doesn't want to be in a meeting with me. He shifts the goalpost to use parliamentarians in the hope that I will not be there. You can't be that childish. We are in a war and we are losing that war. It is amazing that this country doesn't understand what we are going through right now. We have so many people crying, and rightfully so, of the concerns we see on the other side of the pond. But right here, we are in a war zone as well. We have lost tens of thousands of lives over the last few decades by people being murdered in cold blood. And we are speaking so much about the concerns and protesting and boycotting over what is happening in other countries. Where's the concern here? I would expect that persons who, regardless of what side of the political bench you're on, whichever political party you support, should demand from our leaders, let us circle the wagons, work together. I have no intention to keep all my ideas and my experience in my back pocket to hope that the government will fail to help me get in government in 2025. I will not be a patriot. My job is to save this country. And if it is that I can give some degree of advice to a government that does not know what to do because of their involvement by interfering with independent bodies to select commissioners of police and so forth that caused the problem in the first place, if I can assist in rectifying it, I will do so.
Gwari, who is the members of the opposition team, though? Who are they? Because we have not heard any names. We have only heard your name bandied about. Who are the members of the opposition?
I don't think you can see how I will know what the members. You feel you could set me up with.
But it's not a setup question, Gary. Come on, you're talking about transparency, and I saw you.
Let
me finish the question. Let me finish the question, please. So what you're saying, you have no knowledge of who may be included. There have been no discussion between yourself and the leader of the opposition in terms of who may comprise that team. That's what you're saying. At
this time, yeah, because remember, I have my political party to lead. She has hers. I am not going to get involved in asking them, well, who are the people you intend to bring? If and when the time comes and they say, listen, it's going to be, the number is going to be 5 or 4, whatever, then we will discuss. I would expect, though, I mean, I could only speak as a citizen. You know that the UNC, they will have persons who are shadow ministers for national security and so forth. So those might be the players that you might get involved in it. So that's all I could say at this time. What I can say is that
so if you're asked to sit around the table in crime talks with Anand Ram Logan, Anil Roberts, and Rudal Munilal, would you do it?
Sorry, I didn't hear you there.
If you are asked to sit,
I'm joking.
I know you hear me. If you are asked to sit around the table with them, would you?
Well, if it and pertaining to what? Pertaining to these crime talks?
Crime talks, yes.
If it is that the UNC has selected persons and they feel that these individuals are going to assist in trying to provide a direction to help the country in reducing crime, it is not my intention to be able to pinpoint and target as to who the UNC should have and not have. It reminds me of the same thing, gentlemen, with the Jack Warner situation. Jack Warner holds no position of authority in the UNC, and people are concerned that, Gary, why are you working with Jack Warner? Jack Warner is a supporter of the UNC. So unless the person has some degree of authority and there's some red flag of that individual, my issue is that if I am part of the talk, the NT is part of the talks, the UNC will have their individuals. What is an important point, Wendell, is when it is Anand Ramlogan, Rudy Munilal, whoever. The biggest concern, and likewise on the other side of the fence, look at the names that are being called to attend the meetings. The individuals, and this is nothing to cast anything on politicians, but politicians are not experts. So you notice how the schedule is set of legislative agenda. So we have now, the Prime Minister has now formed a subcommittee of Parliament to meet outside of Parliament to discuss legislation. That is defeating the purpose of the exercise. Legislation is a very small percentage of what is required now. We need quick wins. Quick wins is tactics, high visibility, rapid response, policing, making sure that you peg back criminal elements. Legislation are things that we will see the results in 2 years, 3 years' time. So having politicians, whether it is the Anand, the Stuart Young, all the names that you're calling, they are not experts, they are not strategists, they are not tactical, they are not operational. They are civilians who will come up with ideas. What is required for us to turn this back are the persons who have the expertise in law enforcement, not criminologists either. A criminologist has no qualification, training, or experience in law enforcement. We need to have persons who are qualified in the field of law enforcement to come up with a strategic and tactical approach to put a proper operational plan to peg back criminals. Having politicians sit down in a table to come with a legislative agenda is very cosmetic.
Well, what I saw from the Prime Minister's proposal, the group he chose, and Paul pointed it out too, they are all attorneys at law. And they're all members of the, if I'm not, except maybe Randall Mitchell, of the National Security Council. So in other words, it's his highest group of people that he would have brought together to say, let's meet with the opposition and to deal with this issue. We don't know how.
Well, actually when the highest group of people would actually include him. So that's not a really correct statement.
Well, I too am agreeing that he should be there. But let's say he's not there. At least you have the Minister of National Security. You have the other members of the National Security Council. As I say, I'm not sure that Randall Mitchell is one, but he's an attorney at law also too. So I don't know how he fit in there, but
as Gary said, the missive was couched in the context of discussing legislation.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable point that you're making, Gary. That it's obviously a legislative approach
which
to
is not necessarily going to be the immediate. But before we end, Gary, I want to ask a question because that is one side of it and an important side of it because that's the immediate thing facing the population. There's a question that keeps coming up in this country based on the fact that you were a minister, a national security advisor, were a minister of national security, and were a commissioner of police. And the issue of white-collar crime and the real funders and drivers of the importation of illegal guns and also the transshipment of drugs, the transnational drug issue, which seems to be driving the gang warfare. And if you think we as a country are doing all we can, or are serious, quite frankly, about dealing with those people who may be big shots, who may be posing as legitimate business, who we've had this conversation about for decades, but don't seem to have made the kind of progress, or have we made the progress in terms of dealing with that?
Well, I think that's probably why I was people wanting me removed. I started stepping on big toes. I was involved in several investigations of persons not with their pants hanging down and wearing a white vest, but with shirt and tie and jacket, and who are closely affiliated with persons who may be in parliament. And I got in it too deep, and people started being offended. They started being concerned. They whispered in the wrong ears. And the one thing we have with all politicians, who gets the last whisper in the ear is who you believe, and that is what happened, because that's exactly what I was doing. I formed the white collar crime unit specifically for that purpose. And that white collar crime unit comprised the fraud squad in the police service, the ACIB, the FIB, and the cybercrime, bringing them all
that's
together.
operational. How deep is this issue in the country? Because what you tried to do and we stopped, if that's the case, that's fine. We take that conversation. But how deep is this issue of that cadre of the society seemingly being untouchable, as they may call it?
Well, it makes it more difficult for the police to do what is required when it is that we actually give the individuals, like for example, you give a gang member a $5 million state contract to build a box train that costs $50,000, and they're able to use the funds now to be able to purchase more weapons, purchase more drugs, probably pay off police officers, hire police officers to protect them, probably even in other arms.
But that's on the state side. I'm talking specifically about people who import illegal guns and transship drugs. And I'm not saying they're unrelated, but I'm talking specifically about that side of it.
Yeah, and again, that is where we have to use hard policing and tactical strategies to prevent it. The US confirmed with me that 95 to 97% of the illegal guns that enter our country come through the legitimate ports of entry. So all of this OPV and the weapons coming from Venezuela, it's a lie. The weapons that come from the mainland are outdated things from in the days of the Buccaneers. So what is happening is coming from North America, the legal ports of entry. And I drafted the policy for the Prime Minister to form a border protection unit, because you can't just have you have that one rogue customs officer, that one rogue stevedore, that one rogue driver, and that one rogue watchman. We lose 10 containers a year. A container could hold 1,000 firearms. So what the police may seize in 10 years, we could probably get it back onto the streets in one night. That is how important it is to have that border protection unit. I have spoken about it. It will comprise members, all polygraph, of the police, customs, coast guard, immigration, army, all working together, one hand seeing what the other is doing, undercover officers, and making sure we have a proper comprehensive system to monitor and scan all the containers. All of that was rejected. The mobile scanners I had that could be used to assist the port, that was removed after I left. They pulled the plug in.
Why is customs seemingly like an enclave in this country? The police can't go in there unannounced without authorization. We've had these issues with customs for decades. Why is customs like a state unto itself in this country?
Well, that's how it is set. If someone jumps over the gate into the port, the police can't even pursue that person. It's like a different country. And no, there could be some value to it. You don't want any police officer to have full access to walk into a port at any time. But at the same time, because of that, the same way you're going to have rogue elements in the police, you're going to have rogue elements in customs. The only way you could deal with that, gentlemen, is to have a border protection unit with all the persons being heavily polygraphed. One hand is watching the other. The guards are guarding the guards. You'll be able to extract the Trojan horses. That's the best way to deal with it. Other than that, we are going to spin top in mud. The weapons are going to continue to come in. And I can't understand why I will give a Prime Minister a border protection unit that could greatly minimize this problem, and he has rejected it. Why I will have 2 mobile scanners that can assist in monitoring the weapons in the containers, and the plug was pulled. It can't just be incompetence, gentlemen. It can't.
Are you in support of the polygraph bill being taken to Parliament today?
There's a little technicality to that. The polygraph testing is subjective. That's one. So someone based on him having a cold, panicking, a sinus problem, and it triggers. You can't, and it is very difficult to discipline someone based on a polygraph test. Additionally, the polygraph test is not admissible in court. So even if you try to make it mandatory for the individual and he refuses, and you take disciplinary action, he takes the police to court, he can now, the same court will say, but we don't recognize a polygraph test. So there are a lot of technicalities. What I can recommend, rather than make it mandatory, is one, it is mandatory for you to enter any arms of the protective services as a recruit. 2, it is important and it is mandatory for you to do the polygraph test if you want to be in a special unit, such as the special branch, the special forces, FIU. 3, if it is that we believe that there's enough intelligence that can verify that you're involved in some degree of questionable activity, we can voluntarily ask you to do the polygraph test. If you refuse, it can give the commissioner of police, for example, the authorization to transfer, which is what I did. The biggest concern is a lot of illegal drugs and weapons come through our ports, through our shoreline. So the stations as Cedra, Secaucus, and so forth. I asked all of the officers, are you willing to do a voluntary polygraph? Do you financially benefit from drugs and weapons entering the country? Those who refuse, I transfer them to the middle of the country, and there's that I could do. So that is what can happen. This bill I see as a cosmetic because if it is that you believe that protective services officers are involved in criminal activity, do proper police investigative systems to arrest them, not try to tell them we need to polygraph you because we don't have enough evidence to arrest you. Because you're basically telling the person we need to polygraph you to get you arrested. It's not going to work. So if you use those 3 options that I said, and you put more focus on a proper investigative process to arrest the criminal elements in the protective services, that will be of more value.
Gary, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah.
My pleasure.